Welcome friends, so I have 3 more RJ Hampson coloring pages for you today in Steampunk Revivals. So I'm starting with the B page, and I found this table runner at Hobby Lobby, and it's beehive shaped, so I thought that would be perfect for my 3D element. So I use my alcohol markers here to kind of color the page, and I'm still trying to get the hang of the alcohol markers. They're definitely, like, it takes some real skill to use these because they just kind of bleed so much. This first page was probably the easiest one that I did. I didn't do anything special. I just colored it and added my table runner. The last one though, make sure you stay till the end because that one, it was incredibly difficult. And I definitely bit off more than I could chew there. So I know I always rave about RJ Hampson, but I just love his coloring books. They're so fantastic. Just really everything I could want in a coloring book. I have no complaints, and I want to finish this coloring book just as quick as I can, so I have an excuse to buy another one. One thing I have learned about myself is I am a finisher. I may even be slightly OCD about it. I struggle to start things, but once I start something, I have to finish it. It's like this tick that I have. So I watch a lot of coloring videos, and I'm surprised with how many works in progress people have when I don't have any works in progress. Like, if I start something, I'm gonna finish it, even if it looks awful. Like, it will get done. That would just drive me batty if I had a page out there that was half finished. I didn't want the bee to be entirely mechanical. I wanted it to be more like a cyborg, so part mechanical, part natural. And so the only metal part that I have on this bee is just going to be the lining, the gears and things that are lining its wings and its legs, and the rest of it I kept real natural. For the background, I have this yellow ink that I put all over the background, and then I went in with just a little bit of brown, because if you ever look at a hive, some of the hive cavities, I don't know what they're called, some of the parts of the honeycomb are darker than others. So I added in a few spots of brown to give it a little bit of variance in its color. For the hive here, I glued it down with just some regular Elmer's glue. At the end, I didn't film it because days after I had finished this, I had this epiphany that I could use rubber cement inside of the honeycomb to make it look like it was honey. So, not sure if you can tell in the video, but it's all shiny on the inside of the honeycomb and it kind of looks like honey. For my second piece, to be honest, I was a little disappointed with my work here. I don't know if it was the color scheme or if I went too dark. It didn't have enough of light and dark balance, but it just kind of seemed a little bit flat when I was all done with it. You know, if you're ever scrolling through completed coloring pages, the ones that have a huge contrast between the dark and the light are always the ones that kind of catch your eye the best. And this didn't really have a whole lot of contrast between the dark and the light. It was a little bit on the darker side. So maybe that's partly why I'm not as happy with it as I thought I would be. It still looks fine, but it's not something that I would just like stop and stare at and think, oh, that looks really good. I was happy with it still, but... I also do not have a whole lot of colors when it comes to alcohol markers. I have a very small set, I think maybe 20 colors, so I always have a limited amount to use or to pull from. But I just don't know if it's something I want to fully invest in because they're very expensive and I don't know how I feel about markers as a primary medium yet. For all of my metal, I used this dark gray and I went in with a white gel pen to give it that highlight for the metal. Anytime I had these really large places where I had to use this alcohol marker, I realized that how difficult it is. You've got to chase the ink or else you end up with lines. So that is really difficult. Like, you really have to book it. I went in with my pencil to add in all my shading, and for my 3D element for this page, I had this plastic wound vines that I glued all around this page along with just some fake flowers, and that's what I did for my 3D element here. And the smoke, I used just some cotton for the smoke. It took a long time to untwist all of the vines here. And I fought so much with this page, trying to keep the vines down so that they would stick to the glue. I used safety pins. I had bottles sitting on top of these. It was a challenge to get all of the vines to stick. And for the final one. So I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you that this was fun. This was not fun. I had high hopes for this, and it was so much more difficult than I thought. So for the dragon, I wanted him to be like a cyborg, so I started off by coloring in all the places where I want it to be the actual dragon and not the mechanical part. I think that when RJ Hampson probably drew this, the intention was for the whole thing to be mechanical, but I wanted it to be more like a cyborg. And I really wanted to do a color along with him, but I just don't have the right colors, and so I just thought I would just use different colors and it would all work out okay. Well, it did not. So while I was drawing this lady here, everything was just turning into an absolute hot mess, and realized that a color along would not work if I just did not have the same colors that he did. So I abandoned that and just tried to save it. And alcohol markers take so much skill. I'm definitely have to work on my skill there. It's not an easy medium to use. It has a fantastic look if you can figure it out, but learning how to use them is not easy. On the hat here, I went over it a lot with the pink to try to make it all blend, and it blended real nicely, and then it just kept bleeding and bleeding and bleeding until it was just so outside of the lines that it just didn't look good. At that point, I realized I was really going to have to work on my alcohol marker skills. For all the metal places, I have my gold pencil, yellow, and orange, and I just started with the highlight and worked my way out to the dark gold. And one of the great things about gold colored pencils is all these different brands have a slightly different color. So if you can use all of the different brands, they're all going to have a slightly different look to them, so it will look like different metals and different alloys. So I like to alternate all of my gold pencils to make it look like several different types of metal all blended together. The silver, unfortunately, is pretty standard across different brands, but I find that the gold really has a lot of variance. One of the things I definitely don't like about gold, it actually is so opaque that it kind of makes the black lines disappear, so So the buildings in the back were a challenge because it's kind of awkward. They're really, really tall, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to do this, so I just did them like stripes down the page. I think they're meant to look really over-exaggerated and cartoony like a caricature. So I went ahead and just leaned into that because they were really awkwardly tall. I went ahead and added another silhouette of buildings to kind of break up the really, really tall ones. Alright, so I colored the back blue. Most of it's going to be covered up when I'm done. And I was debating on a green or red dragon, like yellow and green or red, and I went with red. And I kind of wish I had gone with green. I think it would have been a good contrast to all the gold and stuff. So once I was done coloring my dragon, that's when things really started to go off the rails. My plan was to put some foam under all of these and give them a three-dimensional look, and I started cutting everything out with an X-Acto knife, and that turned out to be really, really difficult. These pages are not super thick, and I ended up tearing a lot of the little tiny pieces. I definitely underestimated how tricky this would be and how time-consuming it would be, and I'd never done anything like this before. It was a lot harder than I thought. I ended up ripping off one of the chimneys here. And you know, just it is what it is at this point. And then I proceeded to cut out the dragon and the woman because I'm going to have several layers to this piece. And I didn't film it, but I did add some cardstock to the background for some stability. Once I was done with that, I glued this to some cardstock. I had to paint the cardstock black because I didn't have any black, but I painted it black and I glued the buildings down onto the cardstock and glued those to the sky piece. And then I made sure that my dragon was still going to fit nicely there. And then I glued the dragon to some foam, and with the intention of cutting out the foam. And this was not the best move. I should have outlined this piece, cut the foam out, then glued the dragon to the foam, but I didn't do that. So I got to cut this ridiculously tedious piece out a second time, if once wasn't enough. And so the second time, I still managed to rip some of the pieces. Here I took the box of a Monopoly board and started to shape out a building that I'm going to put on either side of the woman and the dragon for some extra buildings that are going to be close to the foreground. And then I used this thinner cardboard to make some of the trim of the building. And then I painted it. I glued that to the side, and then I did the same thing on the other side. Here I have some of my DIY paper clay that I put into a mold, a light fixture mold, and this is what took this video so long. I was waiting on the molds for this to come in. I probably shouldn't have bought this just for this video, but I figured I would reuse it because they're super cute, and I thought I could see myself using this in a lot of different times. And they're so thin, you can tell that they broke a lot, but I didn't think it would matter because I was going to have to glue them onto the page anyway, so I was just going to glue them all together whenever I put the page down. One of the good things about the DIY paper clay is the fibers tend to stick together, so sometimes you'll have a piece like this that's really thin kind of hanging on by the fibers. I'm not gonna lie to you guys and tell you that this piece was fun, because it definitely wasn't. I don't know if I'll be doing this one again, or if I do something like this again, I will use a piece that does not have all these little tiny pieces to cut out. It was fun, and I think it looks fine, but yeah, I don't know if it was worth the headache that it gave me, and the stress of thinking that I had destroyed my coloring page. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Every Monday this month, I will be going through my mermaid junk journal that I made. I'm doing the inside cover and all the embellishments this Monday, so make sure you hit the notification bell so you can see all of those videos as well, and I'll see you guys next time.